Welcome back to the news channel of Nghe An Newspaper and radio and television on YouTube platform. Here, we share and interact with the hottest and newest issues that the public at home and abroad is interested in. And here are some notable contents.
On 9th, Rija Lasmi Chicha, wife of former Nepalese Prime Minister Janalas Kanan, died after protesters set fire to her home in the Dalu area of Kathmandu. According to NDTV, Rija Lasmi Chichaka was trapped in the house when the protesters led by Jen set fire to it. Her family said she was taken to Kitty Burns Hospital but died. Media reported that Prime Minister KP Sharma Ali also had his home set on fire by protesters and announced his resignation on 9th. The incident took place as thousands of RZ youth took to the streets to protest the Nepalese government's blocking of most social media platforms such as Facebook, X, YouTube, Instagram. Citing the company's failure to register and comply with monitoring, the wave of violent protests quickly turned into a movement to protest the government and denounce corruption in the Nepali political elite. A viral video showed 65-year-old Finance Minister Bishan Prasad Bodhan being chased and attacked by protesters on the streets of the capital. Police opened fire and a stabbing in Kandu left 19 people dead. Despite the social media ban being lifted on the evening of the 8th, protests continued. Protesters set fire to the homes of several leaders and set fire to the parliament building, forcing the Kandu International Airport to close. The army had to use ladders to evacuate several ministers. Despite the reopening of social media, the Renet movement has flared up violently due to anger at the police killing of protesters and allegations of corruption in the government. Many young people are particularly upset to see the children of politicians, known as Nepokis, living a life of luxury while most young Nepalis struggle to find jobs. Amid the unrest, India has advised its citizens to postpone their trips to Nepal. On January 9, Air India, Indigo and Nepal Airlines cancelled flights from New Delhi due to anti-government protests. On 10th, the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai, AmCham Shanghai, released a survey showing that nearly half of U.S. businesses have shifted their planned investments in China to other regions over the past year. This is the highest level on record. The AmCham survey was conducted from June 19 to June 20, coming shortly after the U.S.-China trade war escalated and a portion of tariffs were temporarily lifted in mid-May this year. Last August, the two sides agreed to extend the trade truce by 90 days until mid-November. Aaron, chairman of AmCham Shanghai, emphasized that 90 days is too short a period for businesses, noting that supply chain planning requires a long-term vision. At least we're not facing higher tariffs right now, but the problem is not going away, Rang added. According to the survey, 47% of the companies that were exempted have shifted their investments away from China, with Southeast Asia being the top destination. This is the highest percentage since the question was included in the survey in 2017. The Indian subcontinent, including Bangladesh, ranked second on the list of destinations, while the US and Mexico ranked much lower, as President Donald Trump has repeatedly called on companies to bring manufacturing back to the US, while criticizing Apple's plans to expand production in India. Some companies, especially in the high-tech sector, have also announced notable investments in the U.S. domestic market. AmCham Shanghai members include Apple, Ford, Honeywell, Meta, and Tesla. AmCham President Jeffrey Lehman stressed that companies are not only affected by U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods China but also from Beijing's retaliation because the raw materials needed to produce many products are sourced from the U.S. According to the Peterson Institute for International Economics, the average U.S. tariff on Chinese goods is currently approximately 58%, while the average Chinese tariff on U.S. goods is about 33%. However, the specific tariff rates still depend on the type of product. According to the AmTram survey, competition in the domestic Chinese market is also increasingly fierce, while business confidence and prospects for the next 5 years in China continue to fall to a record low for the fourth consecutive year. Only 28% of businesses said that profit margins in China in 2024 will be higher than the global level, while 33% affirmed that business performance in China is worse than other markets. In addition, U.S. businesses admit that Chinese competitors are outperforming in 6/8 competition categories, especially in speed to market and the level of application of artificial intelligence AI. 41% of respondents said Chinese companies are leading in AI applications, up to 62% in the retail and consumer sectors. In contrast, CHAM Shanghai members only said they have a clear advantage over Chinese companies in two areas: product quality and development capabilities. Although the short-term outlook is pressured by trade tensions and concerns about a Chinese economic slowdown, many businesses noted a marked improvement in the regulatory environment. Nearly half, about 48%, said the regulatory environment in their industry has become transparent, up sharply from 35% in 2024. Percentage of businesses that believe a lack of transparency hinders operations fell 12 points to 16%. The percentage of businesses that believe domestic and foreign companies are treated equally also increased by 5 points to 37%. In recent years, Beijing has stepped up efforts to attract foreign investment through friendly policies and active dialogue. Earlier this year, China announced an action plan with a number of measures to support foreign businesses, including making it easier for biotech investment and clarifying standards for government procurement. However, the AmTram Shanghai survey still found that 14% of businesses said the business environment in China had deteriorated, with the technology sector being the most challenging, with 31% of companies reporting this.
On September 9th, AFP reported that 117 South Korean women had filed a lawsuit alleging they were forced to work as comfort women in brothels for U.S. soldiers stationed there from the 1950s to the 1980s. Their lawyers told IP that the group of victims filed the lawsuit last week for the first time, formally accusing the U.S. military of sexual exploitation and demanding an apology. Judges and activists say that tens of thousands of South Korean women were forced to work in state-run brothels for U.S. soldiers stationed there during the 1950s and 1980s. The economy that revolved around such brothels, including restaurants, barbershops, and bars, was said to have accounted for about 25% of South Korea's GDP in the 1960s and 1970s. In 2022, the South Korean Supreme Court found the government had illegally established the management and operation of such brothels for the U.S. military, demanding compensation from the government to about 120 plaintiffs. The new lawsuit by 117 South Korean women names the government as a defendant. Under current law, CUN must compensate victims of illegal acts committed by U.S. soldiers while on duty and then ask Washington for compensation. The victims are seeking $10 million or $7,200 each. Attorney Hazu Hai said the lawsuit seeks to hold the South Korean government and U.S. military officials jointly responsible for related illegal acts. I still can't forget being beaten by American soldiers for bowing my head while pouring drinks, for not smiling, or for no reason at all, said an anonymous plaintiff in her 60s. She said she was tricked into working as a bartender at 17, but was forced into a sensitive job and not allowed to leave because of debt. She recalled that every night we were dragged to the place where American soldiers were stationed and abused, and every week we were forced to take venereal disease tests. If there was even the slightest sign of abnormality, we were locked up and injected with high doses of penicillin, which left our legs numb. The U.S. has deployed tens of thousands of troops to South Korea to ensure security. USFK said it was aware of the lawsuit but declined to comment while the legal process is ongoing.
A bewildered atmosphere is engulfing foreign investors in the U.S. after more than 300 South Korean workers were arrested in an immigration raid in Georgia. Earlier on April 4th, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and U.S. law enforcement conducted an unprecedented immigration raid at the under-construction Hyundai LG battery manufacturing plant in Elabel, Georgia. The raids resulted in the arrest of 457 individuals accused of being illegal laborers, including over 300 South Korean citizens. Videos released by authorities show workers handcuffed and escorted into vehicles used to transport prisoners. ICE stated that when executing the arrests, they discovered these individuals had fraudulently used visitor visas to work in the U.S. According to observers, the raid has opened a new front in the White House's broad crackdown on illegal immigrants, but it also comes with many unintended consequences for the U.S. Multinational companies with many foreign employees working in the U.S. are starting to worry and are frantically seeking legal advice. Matt, head of corporate immigration in the U.S. at SSF Kramer law firm, said clients are constantly messaging them asking if they are at risk of falling into a similar situation. They ask if their U.S. managers are at risk and if foreign staff here on company-sponsored work visas will be targeted by the government. Other immigration lawyers say they believe many of the South Koreans arrested by ICE are individuals who entered the U.S. on B-1 visas, which are used by foreigners for short business trips, or came under related visa waiver programs. Not all of the arrested workers were working for subcontractors, but the regulations related to these entry terms are relatively vague. Dan Marin, a partner at WR Immigration Law Firm, commented that this could be an abuse of the B-1 visa, or it could be an abuse of power by ICE. They may offer a more restrictive interpretation of the regulations regarding what business visitors to the U.S. are allowed to do. Charles C.K., founding partner of Kbaster Immigration Law Firm, based in Atlanta, said he is representing several people arrested in Ellabelle. He said many South Korean workers came to the U.S. under visa provisions that allow providers to assist in installing equipment for a U.S. business. He said 2 corporate clients called him on April 6 who are foreign investors with large facilities in the U.S. They asked how they should prepare to deal with EC agents appearing at their factories. Char Overby, an international trade consultant at DGA Group and former president of the U.S.-Korea Business Council, said some large foreign companies have stopped sending employees to the U.S. for business to review the legal implications of the worker arrests in Georgia. She said the image of hundreds of South Korean workers being treated like criminals is truly shocking. These videos and images are not only shown in South Korea but also in Japan, Taiwan, and other trading partners who also have large investments in the U.S. In an interview with CNN on April 7, Tom Homan, an immigration policy advisor to President Donald Trump, stated that the administration will conduct more such workplace raids in the future. He further noted that intentionally hiring illegal foreign immigrant labor is lowering the wages of Americans. According to Overby from DGA Group, the industries most at risk of visa raids are those that need to bring local talent to the U.S. This need is particularly great in fields where Americans lack technical expertise compared to Asian labor, such as battery manufacturing, shipbuilding, and semiconductors. Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company, TSMC, the world's largest chip manufacturer, said it will spend billions of US dollars to build 6 fabrication plants, 2 advanced packaging facilities, and a research and development center in Arizona. Those familiar with TSMC's operations said the raid on the Hyundai LG factory was considered an isolated case and they believed they were not at risk of similar crackdowns. But Taiwanese executives said the incident certainly made the foreign business community feel uneasy. One person said perhaps Trump did it for some political reason to send a message from the South Korean government. The U.S. government is now truly different and unpredictable. On the South Korean side, images of Hyundai LG workers being detained shocked the public, making them feel betrayed, and the tension threatens to undermine a very close military and economic alliance. For South Korean Prime Minister Lee Young, who took office last June, this was an unexpected obstacle as he sought to leverage his improving relationship with President Trump in exchange for defense commitments from the U.S. John Delury, a senior scholar from the Asia Society, a New York-based research organization, commented that those images would cause long-term damage to America's reputation. According to him, the governments of many countries will now question whether they can trust the U.S. as a solid ally in all situations. As part of the tariff agreement reached last July, South Korea pledged to invest $350 billion in the U.S. However, the raid in Georgia is creating a barrier that will make businesses in this country consider more carefully before participating in the plan. Robert Loran, an immigration lawyer at Foster Global Law Firm in Texas, said the raid would create an atmosphere of panic at factories and businesses employing foreign workers. But according to him, this was bound to happen after a long period of lax U.S. management of immigrant labor. He said there were periods when ICE agents were ordered to stay put unless there was a specific complaint. ICE units are now encouraged to go out and look for immigration law violators. Frankly, they have a lot of targets. On September 9th, Qatari Prime Minister CX Mohammed bin Abdurrahman Al Thani warned that the country would reserve the right to respond to Israel's attack on Hamas in Doha. The Times of Israel quoted Prime Minister Al Thani as stating that Qatar reserves the right to respond to this blatant act of aggression. We believe that today we have reached a turning point where the entire region must respond to such barbaric acts. In addition, Mr. Anthony also affirmed that despite the attack, Qatar will continue its mediation efforts to reach a ceasefire agreement and hostage exchange between Israel and Hamas. On the same day, the Israeli military announced that it had launched an attack targeting senior leaders of the Hamas Islamic movement in the Qatari capital, Doha. This move was met with strong opposition from the international community. The South Korean mission to the United Nations, which currently holds the presidency of the Security Council, announced that it would hold an emergency meeting on the matter under the agenda item, the situation in the Middle East, at 1500 hours on October 10th local time, which is 2 o'clock on October 11th Vietnam time. Diplomatic sources said the Security Council meeting was held at the request of Algeria, Pakistan, and several other countries. As the war in Ukraine enters its fourth year, Europe is reportedly shifting its aid strategy. Instead of simply clearing out existing arsenals, the bloc has shifted to a new wartime economy, focusing on large-scale production and procurement. This infusion is not just a policy shift, but also a race against time to secure support for Ukraine and strengthen Europe's credibility. According to a report from the KN Institute, a significant structural shift is taking place in the way Europe provides military assistance to Ukraine. Figures for August this year show that Europe has surpassed the US in the amount of weapons provided to Ukraine through procurement contracts rather than from stockpiles. Specifically, in May and June this year, at least 4.6 billion euros of European military aid was channeled through the defense industry, bringing the total to 35.1 billion euros since the conflict began. This is 4.4 billion euro more than the US in the same respect. This shows that Europe is gradually moving from emergency aid to a strategy of rolling production orders with delivery schedules and contractual terms. This is an important move to turn ambitions into concrete actions through factories, contracts, and predictable cash flows. Despite the positive signs, Europe's new wartime economy still faces many challenges. Cost concludes that, although there are still many obstacles, Europe seems to be starting in the right direction, which is to finance large-scale procurement, standardization, and transfer money to keep factories running on schedule. Ukraine's task now is to keep up the pressure to keep this while turning every promise into a contract.
In the context of the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, Poland has entered a race to build the largest armed forces in Europe within NATO. From 2014 to 2025, Poland has nearly doubled its military personnel from approximately 100,000 to 216,000 soldiers, becoming the third largest armed force in NATO, trailing only the United States and Turkey. A significant turning point was the domestic defense law passed just weeks after the Russia-Ukraine conflict erupted in 2022, aiming to increase total troop numbers to 300,000. In March of this year, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk further advanced this ambition by announcing a plan to implement large-scale military training for all adult males in Poland, gradually building a 500,000-strong army, including reserves. Not only is it racing in terms of personnel, but Warsaw also leads absolutely in defense spending within NATO. This year, the government aims to allocate up to 4.7% of GDP to defense, equivalent to $35 billion, 3 times the 2014 level and also the highest percentage in the entire bloc. This enormous resource is being transformed into a diverse and modern force. By 2030, Poland expects to operate approximately 1,100 tanks, from domestically produced PT-91 models to German Leopards, American Abrams, and South Korean K-2S, the formation superior in both quantity and variety, more than the total number of tanks of the UK, Germany, France, and Italy combined. The procurement list extends from light FA-50 fighter jets, South Korean K-9 self-propelled artillery, American Apache helicopters, to fifth-generation F-35 fighter jets. Especially after witnessing the lethal effectiveness of just a few dozen HIMARS launchers on the Ukrainian battlefield, Warsaw ordered up to 486 systems, a staggering number even for its allies. In addition to increasing firepower, Poland also focuses on border defense. Sharing a border with Russia's Kaliningrad region and Belarus, Moscow's close ally, the Polish government launched the Eastern Shield initiative last year to strengthen regional security. Besides, Warsaw also followed some Eastern NATO flank countries by withdrawing from the Ottawa Treaty on the prohibition of anti-personnel mines, paving the way for the redeployment of this weapon. Despite the impressive pace of military expansion and increasingly bold military plans, officials, experts, and the media have all pointed out serious gaps in Poland's military capabilities. Gaps that the Russia-Ukraine conflict has proven to be crucial. According to expert Robert Kunda from Lodz University, one of the biggest weaknesses is the capability in unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, and anti-UAV, including electronic warfare systems. While UAVs are becoming increasingly common on the battlefield, Poland has not yet built a sufficient domestic industry or doctrine for combat using unmanned aircraft. Mr. Kunda noted that the lack of a strong UAV and anti-UAV ecosystem is particularly concerning, especially as UAVs have played a central role on the Ukrainian battlefield. This loophole was clearly exposed last month. A Russian UAV reportedly flew 100 kilometers deep into Polish territory before crashing in the village of Oin without being detected. The only system Poland deployed, called Sky Control, is said to be frequently malfunctioning and failed to detect the invading UAV. Polish media warned that if this system continues to be tasked with protecting air bases, the F-16 fleet and the upcoming F-35S will easily become targets for Russian UAVs. Not only UAVs, Poland also faces a personnel problem. Although initiatives such as the Territorial Defense Force have been implemented, Poland's recruitment rate is slowing down. In 2023, approximately 16,000 new recruits joined, but only 10,000 in the first half of 2024. Lessons from Ukraine further highlight this weakness. With a force of 800,000 to 900,000 troops, Kyiv still struggles against Russia's 1.5 million-strong army, MR. Kunda emphasized that the conflict in Ukraine shows there is an effective system for rotating and replacing soldiers at the front line. Poland has not yet created such a system. In addition, Vava faces many difficulties in many other areas such as cyber and space intelligence, domestic artillery shell production capacity, civil defense, and logistics. The government has pledged to invest 16 billion zlotys, equivalent to about $4.4 billion, in the Civil Defense Enhancement Program for 2025 to 2026. However, experts believe that the issues of supply chains and ammunition reserves in a prolonged conflict have not yet been resolved. Earlier this year, National Security Bureau Director Lukowski made a controversial statement, claiming that the Polish army could only hold out for 2 weeks before NATO sent reinforcements. This assessment was later deemed absurd by the Ministry of Defense. However, this statement reflects the reality that Poland currently lacks the logistical capacity and reserves to cope with a prolonged war of attrition like in Ukraine. Sava is also striving to learn from the war in Ukraine. In July this year, the Ministry of Defense announced the UAV revolution, allocating 200 million zlotys, equivalent to about $55 million, to the UAV procurement program with the ability to double the number of UAVs if the domestic industry can meet the demand. NATO also inaugurated the NATO-Ukraine Joint Analysis, Training and Education Center in Bydgoszcz to share direct combat experience. Analysts believe that Poland is focusing on long-range attacks and mobile combat to avoid a war of attrition, investing heavily in US JSMs, the European Long-Range Strike Access Program, as well as modern tanks, long-range artillery, and F-35s. All of this reflects the lessons learned from the Ukrainian battlefield, the importance of precision strikes, abundant logistical resources, and air superiority. However, as Mr. Kunda noted, current steps are not yet fast enough. Conservative mindsets, cumbersome legal procedures, and indecisiveness are hindering the reform process. If not addressed, the Polish armed forces risk being modern on paper but ineffective in practice in a full-scale war.
According to KF Independent, the Ukrainian military intelligence agency HUR recently shared footage showing its forces targeting 2 radar stations of the Russian air defense system located in Kum. Specifically, they claimed to have hit a low-altitude radar 48IA-6K1 LET and an RLMM module from the 55 hours 6 minutes Nebum air defense system. The Ukrainian military intelligence agency added that the RLMM module was destroyed while on the move. Accordingly, when the Russian personnel were leaving their duty positions, the Ukrainian drones attacked. The POTLET system is designed to detect aircraft, helicopters, and drones flying close to the ground, while the Nebum complex can track ballistic missiles and stealth targets. The Ukrainian Military Intelligence Agency did not specify the location of the attack in more detail. Meanwhile, TikBoz also quoted the Ukrainian Military Intelligence Agency as saying that Ukraine had caused multiple explosions in the Russian cities of Penza and Saratov. Specifically, at least 4 explosions occurred in the Zelenodorny district of Penza at around 4 a.m. on September 8 local time, damaging 2 major gas pipelines with a total capacity of up to 2 million barrels per day. The sources added that 2 regional pipelines in the same location were also attacked. The Ukrainian Military Intelligence Agency said that the damaged pipelines supplied fuel to military sites used by Russia in the conflict with Ukraine. However, local media in Benzia published articles claiming that the incidents were part of a planned exercise involving emergency and security forces. In addition, at around 1 a.m. local time on September 8, another attack caused a powerful explosion at the main Khyzop-Lycha oil pipeline in the Saratov district of Russia. The pipeline, with an annual capacity of 82 million tons, is believed to have also supplied fuel to the Russian military during the conflict. Local social media accounts said workers were deployed to the scene in the morning to repair the damage. According to Ukraine, this is the third oil and gas infrastructure in Russia to be disabled within 24 hours.
Fighters of the Presidential Guard Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine recently shot down a Russian cruise missile of the Iskanka complex with the help of the Zu-232 anti-aircraft artillery. The press service of the brigade also posted a video on social media showing the missile being shot down during an airstrike by the Russian military on the night of July 7th to 8th in the Ukrainian capital. The attack on the Russian air target was carried out by fighters of the brigade's missile and anti-aircraft artillery battalion. The ground forces stressed that the shooting down of the Iskanka cruise missile with the Zu-232 anti-aircraft artillery was a stroke of great luck multiplied by great skill. The Zu-232 is a Soviet-designed 23mm twin-barreled anti-aircraft artillery gun. It can be used to eliminate air targets at ranges up to 2,500 m and altitudes up to 2,000 m. The gun is equipped with a 23mm monolithic shell with a high explosive fragmentation warhead and an armor-piercing incendiary warhead. The Ukrainian armed forces have used such weapons, mainly to shoot down Russian suicide attack UAVs and reconnaissance drones. Previously, Ukrainian soldiers of the low-altitude Mobile Air Defense Group showed high efficiency when repeatedly using shoulder-fired missiles to shoot down modern Russian cruise missiles of the Kh-101 and Kalib types. These are completely defeatable targets due to their slow speed and low altitude, making them easy to intercept if the flight path is determined from a distance.
In the context of the prolonged conflict, Ukraine is intensifying its attacks on Russian energy facilities more than ever to cripple a part of Moscow's economic lifeline. This strategy also involves military, political, and diplomatic calculations. Accordingly, targeting energy has become a method of industrial warfare. Instead of focusing solely on direct combat, Ukraine seeks to weaken the rear, which supplies fuel and energy for the enemy's military operations. The Ukrainian military's attacks have disrupted about 20% of Russia's oil refining capacity, equivalent to more than 1 million barrels per day. In August alone this year, more than 10 Russian oil refineries and storage facilities were targeted by forces, including facilities in Krasnodar and Zyryan, which play a crucial role in the fuel supply chain for the Russian military. Last month, Russia's oil and gas revenue decreased by 36% compared to July, equivalent to about $3.5 billion, and by 35% compared to the same period in 2024. In the first 8 months of the year, revenue only reached $74.5 billion, forcing the Russian Ministry of Finance to lower its full-year forecast to $102.8 billion. However, observers note that to achieve long-term goals and effectiveness, Ukraine's campaign also depends on its ability to maintain the frequency of attacks, the accuracy of intelligence, and how to control the ripple effect. The reason for these attacks is not only affecting Russia, but can also impact regional and global energy markets. One of the factors driving the intensified campaign is the relative weakening of Russia's air defense system. After a long period of dealing with attacks, a large number of air defense missiles have been depleted. While the capacity for additional production is limited, the need to allocate forces across many areas also means that some targets in the rear are less tightly protected than before. Technical advancements in unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, help Ukraine seize opportunities. Coordinated attacks using multiple platforms, the ability to jam radar, or spoof defenses have enhanced effectiveness and reduced costs. This opens a tactical window for Kyiv in the current phase. However, the picture is not simply one-sided. Russia is intensifying oil cooperation with China to offset exports, while Europe, which still partly depends on alternative energy sources, risks facing escalating prices as winter approaches. This means that Kyiv's strategy, while putting direct pressure on Moscow, also carries inherent risks, as it could create reverse pressure on its European allies. Beyond the military and economic aspects, the energy attack campaign also carries a diplomatic message. By demonstrating the ability to attack critical targets, Kyiv sends a signal that Moscow cannot be safe even in the rear. This aims to both boost domestic morale and increase political pressure on Russia. However, cross-border impacts complicate the issue. Disrupted energy supplies could affect some European countries, especially Central and Eastern Europe. This creates differences within the European Union, EU, regarding how to deal with both Russia and Ukraine. To avoid losing support, Kyiv's leadership has actively campaigned to meet European politicians to explain and reassure them about the strategy. In the short term, many Western countries maintain their commitment to supporting Ukraine, but in the long term, if Europe's energy or economic interests are severely affected, the risk of division is real. Thus, the effectiveness of this strategy depends not only on success on the ground but also on the ability to maintain diplomatic consensus. The campaign to attack Russia's energy infrastructure reflects a strategic adjustment by Ukraine after heavy losses on the front lines. Faced with the reality that the front lines are increasingly difficult to break through and military resources are being depleted, Kyiv is forced to shift its focus to asymmetric warfare, where long-range attacks can have an impact far exceeding their cost. This is not only a way to compensate for the disadvantage on the front lines, but also an effort to maintain strategic initiative in a conflict that has dragged into its fourth year. For Ukraine, focusing on energy targets brings three key benefits. First, it helps to partially deplete Russia's logistical and operational capacity, which is heavily dependent on fuel. Second, this strategy creates psychological and political impact, sending a message that Kyiv still has the ability to reach out and directly pressure the enemy's economic vulnerabilities. Third, by demonstrating its ability to sustain deep offensive operations within Russian territory, Ukraine strengthens its argument to Western allies that support in UAVs, reconnaissance, and logistics is yielding concrete results. However, the sustainability of this strategy poses many challenges. To maintain the frequency of attacks, Kyiv needs a stable supply of UAVs and intelligence systems. These are factors that Ukraine itself can hardly guarantee without long-term external support. Meanwhile, Russia is strengthening its air defense, meaning that the level of risk and cost in each Ukrainian attack will increase. If Ukraine maintains the intensity of its attacks, it will increase strategic pressure, forcing Russia to disperse resources and face indirect losses. Conversely, if Russia's defensive effectiveness improves, the campaign risks stagnating, making it difficult for Kyiv's tactical advantage to translate into strategic superiority. Ukraine's choice to escalate attacks on Russian energy infrastructure stems not only from calculations to inflict losses on the enemy, but also from the need for strategic self-adjustment in the face of stalemates and attrition on traditional fronts. This is an effort to open another front where Kyiv hopes to transform the technological advantage of UAVs and international support into strategic leverage. However, this strategy is both an opportunity and a test. Its success depends on Ukraine's ability to maintain the intensity of attacks as well as the cohesion and resilience of the West in continuing to provide technology and logistics. In the context of a prolonged conflict, the question arises whether Kyiv can maintain the pace long enough to turn these attacks into a strategic advantage, or will be forced to adjust when facing resource limitations and the fatigue of its allies. Miscalculations will lead to unimaginable lessons. Russia has been responding strongly on the battlefield as a warning sign for erroneous actions. The attacks lead to many unpredictable consequences, increasing tension, and sometimes it is a self-defeating encirclement for Ukraine.